My name is Nessa. I'm 31 years old, and I'm a dental hygienist. The one they call when a patient is 3 years overdue and pretending nothing has changed. I find damage that people have been living around for so long they stopped noticing it. Calm is not my personality, it's what the job made me. Last December, at my parents' Christmas Eve dinner, my mother placed a grocery store gift card and a box of colored pencils beside my 6-year-old's plate, while my sister's daughter screamed over concert tickets to Pittsburgh, and my nephew unwrapped a brand new tablet. My father was cutting his prime rib when he said, without looking up, that I should have planned ahead if I wanted something better for Oliver this year. I smiled at the whole table and said, "Understood." Then I paid the dessert check and drove my son home. But that dinner was only the start. What I found 3 weeks later, in a bank flag and a spreadsheet on my family's shared Google Drive that I was never meant to open, made those colored pencils look like generosity, and what I did about it cost me every seat at that table. I would do it again. Welcome back to Peaceful Drama Stories, where quiet people finally stop covering everyone else's bill, and family ledgers get read out in full. If you have ever been the one who always picks up the check while someone else orders the steak, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and don't forget to subscribe. Because what happened at Easter dinner, 3 months later, is something I need you there for. My parents' house on Millbrook Drive has always looked like everything is fine. Matching curtains, a seasonal wreath, the same dining room wallpaper for 30 years. My mother manages that house the way she manages everything, with complete control and very little discussion. Christmas Eve had 12 people around the long table. My parents, my sister and her husband, and their daughter, my brother and his wife and their son, Oliver, and me. My mother had pre-arranged gifts for each grandchild, personalized, she said, based on what each child would love most. My sister's daughter, 7, got an envelope. Concert tickets, 2, so my sister could take her, plus a hotel night in Pittsburgh. She dissolved into happiness that filled the whole room. My sister filmed it. My brother-in-law looked at the camera like the idea had been his. My nephew, 9, got a tablet. Top of the line, preloaded with every game he'd mentioned since September. He said, "Oh my gosh," 3 times, and my father laughed and said that was the reaction they'd been hoping for. Then the table moved on. Nothing arrived in front of Oliver. He sat with his hands in his lap the way he does when he's trying not to need anything. Very still, very careful. 6 years old and already so practiced at taking up exactly the right amount of space. He looked at me once, a quick check, and I gave him the smallest nod I had. My mother reached across and set a small bag next to his plate. Dollar store tissue paper, the kind you grab last minute. Inside, a $20 grocery store gift card with the activation receipt still stapled to the back and a box of colored pencils, neither of them wrapped. "Oliver is still so little," she said, already passing the rolls. We weren't quite sure what he'd appreciate. Children his age are so particular. My father was sawing through his prime rib. Without looking up, "Maybe when things are more settled on your end, we can plan better." Oliver lifted the colored pencils out of the tissue paper and arranged them beside his plate in color order, red, then orange, then yellow, with the quiet focus of someone turning something ordinary into something intentional. 6 years old and already he knew how to make a thing feel like enough. I don't know where he learned that. I hope it wasn't from watching me. I smiled at my mother. I smiled at my father. "Understood," I said. Then the dessert check arrived, and I paid it the same way I'd paid it at every birthday, Easter, Thanksgiving, and Sunday roast, for 4 years. My father did a very specific jacket pat I had memorized without meaning to. My mother murmured something about the cost of hosting. My brother-in-law was already in the coat line. I put my card down without adding up the number. On the drive home, Oliver fell asleep in the back seat with the colored pencils held against his chest, like something he was keeping safe. I drove without the radio and tried to remember exactly when I had become the person who pays for things nobody thanks her for. Here is what you need to know about my family's finances, at least my part in them. 4 years ago, when Oliver's father left and I was learning what my life looked like on one income, my mother began mentioning costs. My father's prescriptions after his knee surgery, the heating bill in January, soft mentions, never demands. And because I was raised to hear those mentions as invitations, I started sending $300 a month. Nobody asked me to stop, so I never did. 2 years ago, in my mother's car outside a Costco, she asked me to co-sign my sister's car loan. A 4-year-old SUV, just a formality. My sister would pay every cent. I signed because the alternative was 6 weeks of the family phone tree treating me like I'd left someone stranded. My sister paid faithfully for 2 years. I almost forgot my name was on the paperwork. I thought I knew what my family cost me. I only knew the line items I could see. 3 weeks after Christmas, I was sitting across from a loan officer named Kim at my bank, trying to buy a house. Not a big house, a 3-bedroom on Orchard Lane, 4 blocks from Oliver's school, with a front porch that faces east and a yard with exactly enough room for a swing set in the right corner. I had $22,000 saved. 6 years of covered holiday shifts, second-hand furniture, store-brand everything, every overtime hour I could claim. Each deposit had a single purpose, and the purpose had a backyard. Kim was a compact woman with reading glasses on a chain, and the delivery of someone who has given hard news so many times it has become a form of care. She turned her monitor toward me. "Your score dropped 180 points since your last pull," she said. "Underwriting flagged 2 accounts. The first account, a store credit card in my name, balance of $7,200, billing address 412 Millbrook Drive, my parents' house." "I didn't open this account," I said. "I know," Kim said. "The account was opened online. The primary email isn't yours. The contact phone is your cell number. Someone had used my name, my social security number, my phone number, and had been making minimum payments, faithful, regular, never late, for 3 years. The way you service something you intend to keep using." I wrote down the account number in the small, even handwriting I use when I'm holding myself very still. "What's the second flag?" I asked. Kim clicked once. An authorized user had been added to my primary credit card 2.5 years ago. An added user I never approved, never signed for, never discussed. She pointed to the name. "My sister." I thanked Kim. I told her I'd be in touch. I drove home on the interstate with the windows cracked, despite the January cold, and I breathed the way I tell nervous patients to breathe, slow and deliberate. And I thought about the word adjacent, which is dental hygienist vocabulary for the tooth, next to the cavity, the one you have to look at next. I pulled my credit reports that night from all 3 bureaus. I made a spreadsheet the way I chart a patient file, dates, amounts, account numbers, timeline. The store credit card had been opened 37 months ago. The same week I spent 4 days in the hospital after a miscarriage I hadn't yet told most people about. My mother came to sit with me. I gave her my apartment keys so she could check on Oliver. I was grateful for the company. The card had since accumulated $7,200 in purchases, a home goods store I had never visited, a grocery chain near my parents' house, a salon my mother used every 5 weeks, regular as a standing appointment. I sat at my kitchen table at midnight, looking at what I'd built in the spreadsheet, and tried to calculate exactly how long I had been the collateral in my own family. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' house to help with taxes. I do this every February. I have done it for 6 years, because my father's eyesight has gotten worse and my mother has never liked paperwork. It is, apparently, among the things I contribute. My mother was at a church meeting. My father was napping. The study was quiet. My father had kept everything on the family Google Drive since my brother set it up years ago. I had access. I was the one who'd helped him scan and upload the documents. I opened the folder labeled Household. I found the spreadsheet, 12 tabs across the bottom. The first 10 were tax records. The 11th was labeled Family Contributions. I opened it. My column was on the right. A debit list going back 6 years. Family dinners paid, the co-signed car loan, 36 months of $300 transfers. A cash loan from 3 years ago I had apparently agreed to on a phone call I no longer remember. Running total in bold at the bottom, 31,450. My sister's column was on the left. Each entry beside her name had a single notation in the adjacent cell. Gift. I scrolled right, without planning to. A 12th tab. Added 2 months ago, the tab was labeled with a single name, Oliver. Christmas-colored pencils, $8. Receivable, stuffed Triceratops Easter, $14.99. Receivable birthday dinner, Applebee's, March child's portion, $24. Receivable school shoes, September, $38. Receivable. A note at the bottom, in my mother's upright typing, to be settled when circumstances stabilize. My son's grandmother had given him a stuffed dinosaur for Easter and written it into a ledger as money owed. He had been 4 years old when she started the tab. I closed the spreadsheet. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. My father was still asleep. The house smelled like the same dryer sheets it has smelled like my entire life, and I sat in my car in their driveway for a long time before I was ready to drive. I worked my full shift the next day, because patients don't cancel, because your family has been quietly billing your future. There is a mercy in the schedule. Teeth need cleaning regardless of what else is happening. At lunch I told Luz. Luz runs the front desk at our practice. She is 57, has worked there longer than I have, and listens the way people listen when they're doing triage. Fast, accurate, no performance. I told her everything. The gift bag, the bank flag, the spreadsheet, Oliver's tab with the Easter dinosaur. She ate her sandwich, she nodded once. Utility daughter, she said. My cousin was one. Whole family ran on her for 20 years. Then she asked me the question I had no answer to. What scares you more? Losing them, or losing the job they gave you? I opened my mouth, nothing came out. She nodded like she'd expected that. If you've ever found yourself unable to answer that question, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And if you're still here, make sure you subscribe. Because the Easter dinner, where this have finally ended, is coming, and I want you sitting next to me for it. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, after Oliver was asleep, and tried to answer Luz's question in writing. I wrote, losing my parents. I wrote, Oliver losing his grandparents. I wrote, being wrong about all of it. I crossed out being wrong. I had a spreadsheet. I called the credit issuer the next morning and asked for the fraud department. The options came in the careful, practiced language of people who explain this every day. Option 1. Dispute the account as fraud. File a police report. Provide a notarized affidavit. Name the person responsible. The balance would be suspended from my liability. My score could begin to recover. My debt-to-income ratio would clear, and the house on Orchard Lane would still be waiting. Option 2. Absorb the balance quietly, settle it privately, keep the peace. My rate lock expired in 48 days. Without the dispute, my debt-to-income was too high to close. Someone else's child would get the east-facing window. I asked for a few days to decide. Then I called my mother and asked for a family meeting. I arrived with a typed proposal, 2 pages, clear and simple. My mother and father transfer the credit card balance to an account in their own names. My sister refinances the car loan out from under my signature. I remove my sister from my authorized user list. Nobody calls the police. Everyone simply carries what is theirs. I understand now that this was the most radical proposal I had ever brought to that table, because no one at that table had ever been asked to carry their own weight by me before. My brother-in-law crossed his arms and told me that refinancing in the current rate environment was, no offense, basically financial illiteracy. My sister cried. Fast, real tears, which I've learned doesn't mean they're for you. My mother let the noise run its course, folded her hands, and issued her ruling in a voice so level it barely moved the air. This family does not file paperwork against its own people. I looked around the table, and thought about the spreadsheet. $31,450. Oliver's Easter dinosaur, receivable. There's already quite a lot of paperwork with my name on it, I said. The room went quiet in the particular way it does when something true has been said that no one was ready for. My mother's expression didn't change. You were always the capable one, she said, with something that almost sounded like pride. We direct resources where they're most needed. That is what families do. I drove home. I sat in my parking lot for 15 minutes without going inside. I want to tell you what I thought about that night because it matters to the rest of this story. My mother had told me twice, always with the same careful expression, about her own mother's household fund. From the time she was 16, half of every paycheck went into it every Friday, called contribution. Her brother paid nothing. When my grandmother died, he received the house. My mother received a sewing machine. She'd maintained that system for decades and was never once thanked for it. She did not invent this arithmetic, she inherited it. For one long night I tried to find my way all the way to sorry. I almost made it. Then I opened my laptop and looked at the 12th tab with Oliver's name on it, the dinosaur. The colored pencils, receivable. Sorry could wait, my son could not. Before my shift on Tuesday morning, I did 3 things at my kitchen table. I canceled the $300 monthly transfer, 4 years, gone with 2 clicks. I froze my credit at all 3 bureaus so that no one on this earth could open anything new under my name. And I filed the formal dispute on the store credit card, which set a process in motion that no family dinner could reverse. The bank would send written notice to the billing address on the account. I didn't call my mother, I let the bank do it. Banks do not soften their fonts. 3 days later, the $300 didn't arrive in my parents' account for the first time in 4 years, and my phone lit up immediately. A text from my mother, "Sweetie, did you forget your father's transfer? His refill is due this week." I hadn't forgotten. I had remembered, for the first time, that my father has a pension, a paid-off house, and a wife with a remarkable gift for arithmetic. I set the phone face down and let the silence do what it had always been capable of doing, if I'd let it. Saturday morning, my doorbell rang before 8, through the peephole. My mother, her good coat, a white envelope held in both hands like a summons. I opened the door but not the chain latch. She held up the envelope, the bank's dispute notice, already opened, already read. Her voice had lost its usual management layer. "You reported your own mother," she said. "I reported an account I never opened," I said. The bank determined who was involved. We looked at each other through the morning cold. 2 completely different versions of the same piece of paper. "I have to get Oliver to swim lessons," I said. I closed the door gently. In my family, that has always been the loudest thing you can do. The family response organized itself within 48 hours, which for my mother was slow. The group chat filled in layers. A version of me who had snapped under the pressure of raising a child alone, who had perhaps agreed to the account years ago and simply forgotten, who was confused and needed compassion from the people who loved her. The word overwhelmed appeared several times. The word paranoid appeared once and was not corrected. My sister posted something about chosen family. An aunt sent a prayer emoji. One cousin texted me privately, "I once watched your mom write down what people brought to Grandpa's retirement dinner, like with amounts, in a notebook. I always thought it was strange." Other people had seen the arithmetic, they just hadn't been entered into it yet. I didn't post my side. I didn't correct the record. They could have my reputation for a season. They could not have my signature ever again. My sister called my office, which I learned from a message slip. My office manager handed me between patients with the careful, neutral expression we use for complicated family situations. My sister had listed my work number as a reference on the car loan. 90 days of missed payments had finally rolled downhill to a collection agency, which had dialed the number that was, apparently, mine to absorb. I called back from the break room. Under federal law, Once I state that my employer prohibits third-party contact, all further communication must go in writing. I said it twice, calmly, and got a confirmation number, because confirmation numbers are the love letters you write to your future self. Luz appeared in the break room doorway with 2 vending machine coffees. She handed me one and said, "Did you hold the line?" "Yes," I told her. I held it. Kim called Thursday, and for the first time since this started, her voice had room in it. The issuer had accepted the provisional dispute. The balance was suspended from my liability pending investigation. Underwriting had accepted her documentation of the cosign history. My rate lock would hold. "Congratulations," she said. "The house on Orchard Lane is yours to close on." I sat down on my kitchen floor with the phone against my ear and let myself feel it, all of it, for exactly 2 minutes. 6 years of packed lunches and night shifts and passed-up vacations, all of it pointed at a front porch that faced east. The porch was real. There was still the matter of Easter. My mother called a week out, voice pleasant, to say there would be a family dinner, and she hoped Oliver could come because his grandfather had missed him. She has always known which key still fits my lock. I went because Oliver asked to, and because I don't hide from rooms. Everything at the Easter table was correct in a way that felt like surveillance. A basket of candy at Oliver's seat. The hostess mentioned it had been requested in advance. My sister greeted us at a warmth I hadn't felt from her since high school. My brother-in-law complimented my car. My mother made sure Oliver got the end piece of the lamb, the one with the crispy edges he loves. She knew he loved them. She had always paid attention to the details. That was the eerie part. The machine knew exactly what generosity looked like. It had simply never run that program without billing for it. After the plates were cleared, before dessert arrived, my mother tapped her water glass once with her knife. "Before cake," she said, smiling at me down the length of the table. "I have something for my oldest daughter." The envelope was cream, heavy stock, my name on the front in her handwriting. Inside, a single typed page. Family Resolution Agreement. Item 1. I withdraw the bank dispute within 72 hours. Item 2. I assume the credit card balance privately, handled as a family matter. Item 3. Monthly family contributions resume at $350, adjusted for the current year. Item 4. And this is the one I want you to sit with. Oliver receives full family inclusion. Holidays, birthdays, grandparent access, all of it, in exchange for my compliance with items 1 through 3. My son's place at the family table, itemized, priced, and dated in his grandmother's handwriting. A signature line at the bottom with the date already filled in. My mother folded her hands and addressed me in her blessing voice, the one she uses before grace. "Sign it tonight, sweetheart, for your father, for Oliver. Family means nobody keeps score." I want you to hold that sentence next to the 12th tab, with my son's Easter dinosaur logged as a receivable, because I did. I looked at the page. I looked at Oliver, working through his lamb with the focused seriousness of a child, who can feel that something is happening without knowing what it is. And I stood up. Not fast, not loud. I've learned from years of working in small rooms with nervous people that the quietest voice sets the volume. Every head at that table leaned in without deciding to. Before I answer, I said, "I want to tell you something I know." I looked only at my mother. "I know about your mother's household fund. I know that from the time you were 16, half of everything you earned went into it, every week, without thanks. I know your brother paid nothing and received the house. I know you stood at that sink for decades and kept putting in what was required, and not one person said thank you." I paused. "You didn't invent this system. You inherited it, and I think I'm the only person at this table who actually understands what that cost you." My mother went absolutely still. My father set down his fork without a sound. "So I'm not going to shame you," I said. "I'm not going to read anything out loud or make this into a performance. But the tab on Oliver ends today. His page closes right now. And on Monday morning, the dispute finalizes, not to put anyone in handcuffs, just to give me back my name. That's the only thing I need. My name returned. Everything else can go where it belongs. My mother's voice cracked upward once, sharp, and she started a sentence that didn't finish. I hadn't flinched, hadn't flushed, hadn't given her a surface to push against. I set the resolution agreement beside the Easter bread basket, unsigned, which felt like the correct place for it. I counted out cash for 2 meals, mine and Oliver's, and left it under the salt shaker with a good tip. The arithmetic of a woman who pays for exactly what she ordered and nothing that she didn't. Understood, I said, one final time to all of them and none of them. Then I helped Oliver into his jacket. He hugged his grandfather around the neck and said, "Happy Easter, Grandpa," in his careful, quiet voice. And my father held on one beat longer than a hug, whispering something into my son's hair that I couldn't hear from where I stood. We walked out past the centerpiece and the lamb and 40 years of my family's accounting, out through the front door. Nobody clapped. Real life doesn't do that. But Oliver looked up at me the second we stepped outside and asked, very seriously, if we could get ice cream. Yes, I told him, we absolutely could. Monday at 9 a.m., I kept my appointment. My hand was steady. The signature I put on the dispute affidavit was the first document my family ever received from me that I read completely before signing. The restitution was handled through a lawyer, quietly, the balance returning to where it had always belonged. I signed nothing after that, except my mortgage, which I read twice, every page, out of new habit. Kim called the following Thursday. "You're clear to close," she said, and for the first time I'd heard it, her voice had something warm in it. "Whenever you're ready." I was ready. Moving day was small and exactly right. Luz and her husband came early and bossed the whole operation. 2 hygienists from the practice wrestled my second-hand couch through the front door sideways on the 3rd try, laughing, while Oliver supervised from the porch in his dinosaur rain boots. At some point, I stood in the middle of my living room, with nothing in my hands, and understood that I was inside a space that had never once asked anything of me, and I had built it myself. Oliver's room went together last. His bed against the east wall, exactly as I had measured with my eyes months before the house was mine. I stood in the doorway and watched the morning light land on him while he arranged his dinosaurs along the windowsill in careful formation, and I didn't make a sound. My father came by that afternoon. He stayed 20 minutes, never past the front hallway, hands in his pockets, looking at the bones of the house the way he looks at engines, approving of what he sees, unable to say so. On his way out, he stopped next to Oliver and pressed something into his hand, folded into quarters the way men of his generation pass money when they don't want it made into a moment. A $20 bill. He leaned down and said something quietly into my son's ear. I was across the room. Oliver came to me afterward, very solemn. "Grandpa said this one is just for me," he reported, "and not to write it down." My father was at the end of the driveway by then, moving toward his car with his eyes straight ahead. I let him go. Some people can only tell you the truth when they're on their way out the door. I've learned to take that version of it and keep it, because it's the only one they have left. The machine is still running over on Millbrook Drive. Machines like that don't grieve. They restaff. But its oldest account is closed, and the newest one ends with a boy who will never know his Easter dinosaur had a price tag in a spreadsheet somewhere. My sister texted 6 weeks later, "Things are tight. Can I borrow?" I didn't read the rest. I typed back, "No, but if you ever want to know how I found the exit, I can tell you." She hasn't responded. She will, eventually, when the machine turns toward her fully. I hope she finds the door before it costs as much as it cost me. I left it open. These days, Sunday mornings belong to the diner 4 blocks down. Oliver orders first. Triple stack of pancakes, extra syrup, no conditions attached. He doesn't have to earn his seat. He never did. I just had to build him a table where that's simply the rule. Last Sunday, he looked up from the middle of his pancakes and asked, out of nowhere, Why families are sometimes mean to each other. I thought about the spreadsheet, about the jar on the windowsill, about a woman who was handed a system and passed it forward because no one ever showed her a different language. Sometimes people learn the wrong way to keep the people they love safe, I said. And they pass it on before they understand that it's wrong. He thought about this the way he thinks about hard things. Very seriously, forehead creased. Did someone try to teach you the wrong way? He asked. They did, I said. He looked at me with his lie detector face. But you didn't learn it. I looked at him across a vinyl booth in a diner that has never once sent us a bill for the warmth inside it. Not the version they were teaching, I said. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his pancakes. The check came to 21 60. I tipped like a woman who spent too many years asking permission to spend her own money. And then my son and I walked home 4 blocks uphill, Oliver narrating the entire way about whether a stegosaurus could beat an ankylosaurus in a fair fight. And the answer changed 3 times before we reached the porch. A family that keeps a spreadsheet on what it gives you was never giving. It was lending. The interest was your trust, your signature, and eventually your child's name on a tab you never knew existed. The bravest thing you can do is close the account, take back your name, and build something that never once sends a bill for the light coming through the window. That's the house we live in now. And nobody here keeps score.